Our guest speaker today, and we're certainly very fortunate to have someone of his stature in our community and being able to come and speak to us today, is the son of Antonio and Fernanda Polesel. They're obviously both immigrants of northern Italy. Tom graduated from Oakville Senior High School. He then went on to an illustrious career at the University of Missouri-Rolla, where he earned his Bachelor's of Science in Geological Engineering. Beyond that, he then was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army upon graduation. Tom took that skills and his experience in the United States Army to serve his country further. He was a platoon leader with the Bravo and Charlie companies of the 317th Engineering Battalion, 3rd Brigade, 24th Infantry Division at Fort Benning in Georgia. Then he left active duty in 1996 and then worked with the Missouri Army National Guard throughout 2004 after serving with the 220th Engineering Company in Festus and the Missouri State Headquarters in Jefferson City. Well, from 1996 through 2004, Tom spent his weekends and he added his vacations helping to develop the family vineyard and the winery, and thus in 2004 became full-time at the Villa Antonio Winery, rather, where he is now the general manager and an owning partner as well. So please join me in a very warm welcome for our speaker for November, Mr. Tom Polesel.
Thanks, everybody. Just want to say that I'm very pleased to be here today, and thank you for this opportunity. Can everyone hear me okay? I'll take so. All right, real quick, I'm going to be speaking today about the business side of the winery, a little bit about our history, and quite a bit about our personalities, my parents, myself, and the other key people at the winery. I'll be here for quite a while, so if you have any questions, I'll be more than pleased to answer them. Let's just hold them to the end. And with that, let's get started. First off, well, I'm Italian, so I got to walk around. So does the speaker work okay? I guess the mic is still on. So, you know, my parents are both from Italy. They're both immigrants, and they each have a very unique history. So let me start real quick with my dad. He was born in Italy, in Treviso, which is just north of Venice at the foothill of the Dolomiti Mountains. And they grew up on a farm. Now, a farm in Italy, I guess, was probably, you know, in 1935, it was probably similar to an American farm, that they grew almost all of their own crops. You know, they had corn, grain, they had livestock, they had a vineyard, they had an orchard, you know, and they were pretty self-sufficient. They also lived in a house, a very old house, without running water, and they had only recently obtained electricity. So he tells me stories that there was a hook next to the sink where his mother, you know, prepared food, and he would have to go to the well in the town square, in the center of the town, pick up the water, bring it back, put it up on the hook, and then she had water, you know, next to the sink for doing dishes or cooking or doing whatever. And you know, multiple times a day, he had to go and do it. He also told me that he was one of the lucky ones because their house was right next to the plaza where the well was, and the poor suckers down the road had to walk a quarter mile. You know, so anyway, that's one of his early stories. But he grew up, as I said, on an Italian farm, and his early experience with grapes and making wine is from that time. Now you have to understand, in Italy, in the 1930s and 40s, there weren't wineries in the modern sense. All right, as I said, grapes were a crop, and you know you can't really preserve them in any way, so you're forced to make wine. So they would take the grapes and they would crush them up, you know, and it was a natural fermentation. I mean, there's no chemicals, there's no yeast, no, you know, I mean, the grapes have yeast on the skin of the grapes, so you just literally crush them in a wooden vat and they ferment, and when they're done fermenting, you put them in a barrel. And he remembers, you know, obviously seeing all that and helping with it. And then you would take the wine, the raw wine, you'd put it in a barrel, seal it up, and it would stay there. And when you were ready to start drinking it, you literally put it in the house up on a shelf or whatever, and you would tap it and you would pour right out of the barrel. I mean, you'd have a little wooden spigot, you know, some of you guys are nodding, you've probably seen it. And I asked him, well, why in the heck didn't you bottle it? He's like, Tom, we didn't have bottles. You know, bottles were money. You know, you're lucky we had a barrel. So they didn't have bottles, they didn't have corks. they would literally just, use one barrel at a time until it was gone. But getting back to his early life, he grew up on the farm in Italy. A lot of his early remembrances and his personal experiences were formed at that time. His father died while he was very young, only 15 or 16, and after that they decided to immigrate back to the United States. I say back because my grandfather actually had been working in the United States as a laborer for the railroad, loading and unloading rail cars of bags of cement. I mean, talk about a job. He did that for 3 or 4 years on a work visa, and he was, I guess he was the pace setter, so he kind of, kept the crews going. But then he developed an allergy to the cement, and he was coughing up blood and all kinds of stuff, so he couldn't work, so they went back to Italy. And the fortunate thing is, my dad's older 2 sisters were born in the United States, so they were American citizens. And that's really important because obviously after my grandfather passed away, it meant that the family then had the option basically of being able to go back to the United States. And obviously if they hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be talking. But he's 16. They take the slow boat from Italy. They come here back to St. Louis, where the family originally had roots. And Dad learns English in night school, and then he goes on to the military. He was in the Air Force for a few years. Another interesting happenstance there. He was in the Air Force for a couple of years when he was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And because he was in the Air Force, they were able to take care of him and operate on him and whatever, and he's alive. Now, if he hadn't joined the Air Force, they sure didn't have health insurance, and I doubt that he ever would have been diagnosed with tuberculosis. He probably would have just died young. So once again, through a happy twist of fate, I'm still here. Anyway, he got into electronics after the Air Force. He had a television sales and service shop in South County for my whole childhood. I'm sure Carolyn remembers that. And he stayed in the business until 1988. And about that time, if you recall, people did the unthinkable. They started pitching their broken TVs and stereos because it was so cheap to just go buy another one. So basically, he closed the business in 1988. We sold the house in South County. We had a weekend place out in outside of Farmington, and he sold that as well. And he bought this wonderful piece of ground where the winery is today, in Sandy Valley, in between Peevely and Hillsboro. So the important things from the winery perspective, I guess, or from the business side, that I want you to take away with that is, he's really a self-made man. All right, he had a high school education in Italy, no more. He did trade school under the GI Bill, and just one more interesting thing about Dad. After he got his electronics certificate, he got a job working for a guy, and within a couple of years, he was going there, opening the shop. He was taking care of the customers, taking care of the money, fixing the TVs and the radios, closing the shop, and putting the money in the bank. And he's like, why? Why am I getting a paycheck instead of the whole deal? So he said enough of that, and within literally a couple of years of being out of school, if you will, being done with the Air Force and electronics school, he had his own business, and he had his own business for pretty much his whole life. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. But he is very intelligent. He's self-taught. He's extremely self-reliant. I mean, he's taught himself how to do so many things, from making wine to taking care of the vineyard to carpentry. I mean, if there's a project, he can do it, And that's been of huge benefit to both me personally and to the winery as a whole. Now, my mother's story is similar and yet not. She grew up in northern Italy as well, in a peninsula of ground called Istria, which is just to the south and east of Venice. It's pretty close to the Adriatic Sea. And the town she was born in was called Galazzan. Now, I imagine that her ancestors were living the same lifestyle for probably well over 1,000 years. I mean, we have a priest cousin, she has a priest cousin in Rome that traced the family back all the way to Roman times. So like 1,400 years, that's where the family was, the Tarticchios. Istria was part of Italy, as I said, when Mom was born. She was born right near the end of World War II. Now, there are unfortunate circumstances when your country loses a war. One of them is you might well find out that your land is assigned to a different country, which is exactly what happened. The whole region of Istria was taken away from Italy as basically a penalty for being on the wrong side, and it was assigned to this new country of Serbia, the Kingdom of the Serbs and Croats. Now, Serbia was going to be under Tito, who was communist. My grandfather was another very uniquely Italian guy. He spent most of World War II in jail for insulting the Germans. So, you know, it's just not a very political sort of man, all right? But, yeah. So I guess supposedly he got drunk and mouthed off to some Germans that they were going to lose or something. And he's lucky he didn't get shot, but he just ended up going to jail. So anyway, he figured if the Germans were bad, the communists weren't going to be much better. So they had this wonderful choice. You either become, live under this communist country, this communist regime, or you pack up your family and you leave. And he chose to leave. So my mom's earliest remembrances aren't of Galazan or of Paula, but they're probably more of being in internally, what do they call it, displaced persons camps, refugee camps, right? And they were administered by the American and the British forces. And they would move from camp to camp, as more people immigrated to other countries, camps would be shut down and she'd be kind of moved around. So I think this had a pretty profound impact on my mother and on her desire for stability, for maybe respectability, and she'd probably be mortified to know I'm talking about this, but anyway. But it did have a real bearing, I think, on her as a person. But more importantly, in 1935, there was this tragedy called the Hungarian Revolution or Hungarian Revolt, and what it did for my family was it lifted all the immigration quotas for Europe. And because of that, the family was able to come over to the United States years earlier than perhaps they would have. My mother was in the 3rd grade. They settled just by chance. I mean, in her particular case, I don't think they had a choice of where they went. They just were put on the list. As a matter of fact, there's a funny story about how they got on the list. Apparently, my grandfather was out partying one night. Came home early in the morning, right? And and signed up the family for this list, which happened to be immigration to the United States. Now, if he had picked a different list, maybe they'd be, immigration to Australia or something. I don't know. Well, I sure don't think he knew what he was doing, at least according to the story I got. So, it's hearsay. I wasn't there. But anyway, so they end up coming to the United States, and Catholic Relief Services saw fit to put the family in St. Louis. Or I should say the sponsor from Catholic Relief Services was in St. Louis, and that's where they came. They settled onto the Hill, and Mom learned English. They settled in, and the Hill is really a unique community. Neither my grandmother or my grandfather ever learned to drive a car, and they never learned to speak English. I mean, honest to God, that there was enough Italians there, and it was walkable, just like they were in Italy. They never changed. Which made communication hard for me because I never learned Italian. But anyway, so Mom gets there. She graduates from Southwest High School, and now she does another almost unthinkable thing. She announces that she's going to go to college to be a nurse. Now, my grandfather, again, a very unique Italian guy, as soon as the children were old enough to work, he put them to work. And when they came home, he put their paycheck to work too. So, literally, you worked for the family. That I don't know if that was typical of the time, but that's how he did it. So when she said she was going to go to college, and the courses were going to be at night because she had to work 2 jobs to pay for it, he was very upset because no respectable woman would be out after dark unless she was married, among other things. But he wasn't too thrilled, but I don't know the whole story, but she went to college. She became a nurse. She started work at Alexian Brothers. And then at some later date, my father got married, and here I am. But she was she took time off while we were kids, to raise us. But then she went back to school. I'm not sorry, back to school. She went back to work, and she ended up as a surgical nurse at Barnes. But there's a whole other side besides her history, and that is, where did Mom learn to cook? All right. Well, when they immigrated to the United States, both my grandmother and my grandfather were working. All right. So my grandmother, in her I'm sure rather succinct way, just said, "Nanda, when you come home from school, make this and this and this for supper." She was 12 years old, and she was put in charge of cooking supper for the family. And that was her first real beginnings of how to cook. And it was probably all pretty rustic Italian food, but that's what she started learning. Later, when she and Dad were married, my father actually is a pretty good cook. And he learned northern Italian cuisine, a little bit different than the regions where Mom was from. And you'll really have to ask them exactly where she learned all of her skills. But I tell you what, I always ate really well as a kid. There was no shortage of good Italian food. There were always cakes and pastries. Even when I was young, I remember her making wedding cakes and birthday cakes for people. She was just, if she wanted to do something, she would teach herself how to do it. And even if it took her a little while, she would always get there. So I guess what's interesting, the personality traits I think that define my mother is that, she's stubborn to the point where if she wants to do something, she's going to do it. Come heck or high water, she's going to do it. She is also extremely intelligent, and unlike my dad, I would say she is absolutely a perfectionist. It has to be done her way, perfectly, every time, or you're going to hear about it. So this thing with my dad about, it's good enough, Nanda, no, it's not good enough, and no one's going to sleep until this gets figured out. So, but anyway, that's been a tremendous asset for us at the winery, because it's held our standards high. When you get tired and you get a little lazy, you're like, this will be fine. No, Mom won't go for that. She's like, do it right. Anyway, so that's a little bit about my mother. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about myself. As you heard in the introduction, we were born and raised or I was born and raised in St. Louis County in Oakville. Graduated Oakville Senior High. After high school, I went into ROTC. They paid for my education. Went on to the University of Missouri at Rolla. Graduated in geological engineering. Ended up in the Army. The Army was very interesting, very formative place for me. I learned all about leadership, about working with other people. And I also learned that it wasn't probably the right fit for me. So I left early. When I got out, we came back to St. Louis, and I took a job over at Metropolitan Engineering and Surveying right there in Barnhart. I was there for about 3 years, long enough to earn my professional engineering certification and to learn how to survey. And I took that information and promptly left and opened my own business. I did that for a couple of years before I got a better offer as a facility engineer up at Spirit of St. Louis Airport. I did that for 3 years. And then the most peculiar thing happened. I met my wife-to-be. She was finishing up her residency at St. Mary's. And we started talking about getting married. And this whole time, from college and before, I'd been spending weekends and evenings and holidays helping to build up this vineyard and the winery, and it was just starting to really show some promise. And my wife was like, we can go anywhere. I'm a doctor, you're an engineer, where you want to go? You want to go to California, you want to go to Florida, you want to go to Hawaii? And I'm like, gosh, Adriana, I really kind of want to quit my job and go to work full-time at the winery and not pay myself for a few years. And, and I know I can talk pretty well, but I don't know. Somehow she went for it, and I think some days she's still kicking herself. But yeah, honest to God, that's how it happened. So 2004, I quit my job at the airport, came to work full time at the winery. And another interesting thing is, I said, honey, if I can't pay myself what I'm making as an engineer in 3 years, I'll quit and we can go to New Orleans. She's from New Orleans, and that's where she always wanted to go. Well, 3 years into it, I still wasn't paying myself a whole lot. And I'm like, but look how much we've grown. Anyway, so we're still here, but without her help and support, I certainly couldn't be doing this. I think that the reason I bring up all of my history is I think it sheds a little bit of insight on my skills, which is, I have the leadership training, the management training. I'm also technical with engineering, with surveying, with developing plans, with working with regulators. So there's a whole nother skill set that I was able to pick up in life that feeds right in with my parents, so that collectively there's very little that we can't accomplish. And I think that's a tremendous asset for us as a business. Now there's two other people I just want to briefly mention. The first of which is Ron. You remember Ron growing up. Ron Norris is a friend of mine since we were like wee little kids. And he didn't go on to college after high school, but we graduated together, and he went into landscaping. He had his own landscaping business for probably 15 years before he hit a rough patch. And about that time, we were starting to grow, and we needed some help. So talked to Ron, and he agreed that he'd come on with us full-time and do his landscaping part-time. And what that did for us as an organization was it gave us a whole other set of skill sets that no one had, which was all the landscaping. How many of you guys have been out to the winery? You guys, all the retaining walls, all the plantings, all the paver patios, all of that stuff was done by Ron. He's taught me how to do a lot of it by now, but he's the one that lays that stuff out, who takes care of the construction, who builds it all, in addition to all his other duties, of maintaining the vineyard and taking care of the grounds. But when you go out there and you see it looking beautiful, it's because Ron's standards with landscaping and with that kind of construction is just as high as my mother's with the food and everything else. He's his own little frickin' perfectionist. I never knew there were so many wrong ways to plant something, okay? But that's Ron. All right, now the other person is Donna. Donna B, she's in the corner. I'm gonna embarrass her a little bit. Donna's she's basically my, what do you call it, the business manager, the staff manager. 3 years ago when she started coming, working for us full time, I was doing, all the outside things, working with the wine. I was, helping with the grounds, helping with the vineyard, and I was also doing all this horribly tedious junk with government regulations, payroll, forms, and I hated it, right? I can do it, but I certainly don't like it. Donna is like a master of all that stuff. So I was able to say, Donna, here. And she runs the staff for me. She hires all the part-time people. She really makes all the day in and day out stuff work. And we couldn't grow and we couldn't exist without Donna's help. So, she's been a tremendous asset to us as well. Anyway, getting on to the actual winery. I'm going to run through a quick chronology of how things have happened. And just to reiterate, in 1988, that's when Dad sold our holding, the house in St. Louis County and a weekend place, and he bought the winery. Now, just to give you a quick mental image, I meant to get pictures together, but I'm just not that organized. And the winery, what is now the winery, at that time, it had not been kept up maybe for 3 or 4 years. It had every look of an overgrown, abandoned farm, all right? The winery building itself was 3 separate log cabins that had probably been lived in for maybe a couple of 100 years. I really have no idea how long. But, when you went upstairs where our business office and storage is now, I remember taking something like 13 5-gallon buckets of mud daubers out of there, all right? It was just wood. They didn't use it for anything, all right? It was just left to the critters. We found newspapers from the 1870s and 80s nailed, and this is another interesting story because it was just so silly. Whole newspapers, all right, nailed over the cracks in the logs and the boards to stop the breeze, right? That's great. But I swear they must have given some little kid a big box of nails because they were roofing nails, and he put them like every inch. Every frickin'. So, I'm trying to get this copy of this 18 whatever's newspaper off. So, I think it's pretty cool, just be able to have it. But to get it free of all those roofing nails in oak boards, it just didn't work, you know. So, but seriously, that's what they use to, you know, paper over stuff. So the cabin was in dire need of rehabbing. The cellar underneath that we use now for storing stuff, I guess the drainage had changed over time, and every time it rained, the drainage would go right into the cellar, and it would flood about 4 feet deep, all right? So with all that water hanging around, of course, the foundations and everything were, you know, well, there are no foundations. It's, you know, rock piles, and then the logs on the cabin would set on the rock piles. Well, all those logs were deteriorating really quickly because of all the moisture. We had termites in there. You know, even now, there's no two floors in the cabin that are level. I mean, they all kind of have their own little pitch. You know, if it's level, it's because we had to tear it out completely and rebuild it. So the farm, when Dad bought it, it needed a lot of love, all right? But still, in 1988, he bought it. In 1989, he had C&H Construction. Bob and Charlie, you guys probably, some of you know them. They put up Dad's house, at least a shell, and then Dad spent the rest of the year with Ron and I helping him to finish the house. And in 1990, the house was essentially done, and he started planting his vineyards and improving the grounds. You know, we had these huge thickets of the locust trees, you know, with the monster thorns. They were like, I don't know, Johnny Appleseed of the thicket bush or whatever went out there, thistle. They were every frickin' where. We lost more tires that year, but so, you know, we started cleaning up the grounds, you know, and Dad started planting his vines. And what he did was he went to Geneva, New York. There's a fruit experiment station that used to work with Cornell University in Geneva, New York, and they had a catalog. And he mailed out, you know, for like 10 different varieties of grapes. All these grapes came, you know, I think he bought like 10 or 15 plants of each, and he planted them in one section. This is like the trial vineyard, if you will. And he just gave them time. And the varieties that did well, we would propagate, or he would propagate and expand the vineyard. And the ones that didn't, he just left them alone. So in 1990, that's when the vineyard started, with this trial section. And then, you know, literally from 1990 to 1999 is I'm going to call it this like a period of work without rewards. I mean, we weren't open. We had no product. The only revenue, I mean, Dad was retired, so Mom was basically, she was working as a surgical nurse. I was first in college and later in the military, so I was pretty much out of the picture. And Dad would work, you know, week after week, day after day, expanding the vineyards, cleaning up all the brush and the hedgerows, you know, opening up the fields. You know, and when I say building the vineyards, he would, now you guys are familiar with propagating vines, taking cuttings, right? He would take the cuttings from one year, bury them in sand, plant them in the garden the next year, give them a year to grow, and then he'd transplant them out into a vineyard. The vineyards, all the posts, he would cut cedars, you know, clean them up and put the posts in the ground with a post hole digger. I mean, he didn't spend anything on anything. I mean, the only thing he bought to increase the vineyard was wire. I mean, that's the only thing he couldn't make. And if he found out a way to do it, he'd try that too. So, I mean, he really was able to expand this thing without spending a whole lot of money, which is the only way we could have done it, because there just was no money. So by 1999, we probably had about maybe 2 acres, 3 acres of grapes in the ground. And, you know, the most remarkable thing happened after he got more than a couple acres of grapes is all of a sudden, come fall, he'd have a whole pile of grapes. So he started to relearn how to make wine. And the interesting thing is, like so much of our business, our skills have grown as the facility has grown, as the vineyards have grown. And with the winemaking, that's exactly how it happened. You know, the first year he made wine was probably 1994, all right, 93, 94. The vines were probably 2 or 3 years old. I think he made 10 or 15 gallons of wine, right? Some of it turned out, some of it didn't, you know, but for a guy who learned to make wine in Italy, just watching his dad crush them up in a barrel and let them ferment, you know, modern winemaking is a lot more science as well. So he started reading books on that, and he started learning year to year and making more wine and better quality wine. So, by the time we opened in the year 2001, he had been making his own wine there on the grounds for probably 8 years. So that, again, his skill sets grew as the vineyard grew. All right, so yeah, from 91 to 99, he built the vineyards, he cleaned up the property, we rehabbed the cabin. That was a whole nother deal. We took that cabin and we gutted it down to the log walls. And it's interesting, if you go in the front hall, you can see the logs are scorched in one spot where the place almost burnt down. Well, there's like 6 spots like that throughout the cabin. I mean, I don't know, someone must have been playing with matches a lot over the years, but seriously, there's whole logs that were eaten out by termites. They were just hollow shells. Other spots where, as I said, it had partially burnt. But we stripped it down to the logs, we rebuilt it. Another interesting thing is Dad had his own little sawmill. He drove over to Illinois and bought a sawmill shaft and the, the bearings, and got a couple of used saw blades, 24 inches. And he built his own carriage and put a 5 horsepower gas motor on it and started cutting up his own logs into lumber. And then he used the lumber to refinish and rebuild the cabin. So again, extreme self-reliance. All right. So in 99 to 2001, we hit a whole new phase, which was we had wine to play with. So Dad was doing more and more of that. He got actually to the point where he could make more wine than he could drink in a year, which was that was a milestone. So then he had to start buying barrels, and because he first started making wine in these 5-gallon glass carafes. You guys have probably seen them. It's perfect for a home winemaker. But anyway, so he had to set up a cellar. He had to start buying barrels and stainless steel tanks. And then we hit this wonderful phase called getting permits. That was a challenge and a half. I mean, in order to become a winery, you have to first and foremost become a bonded winery with the federal government. All right, it's a federal permit, and they want to know everything under the sun. All right, so you have to negotiate this process, and of course you can go to a consultant and they'll charge you $10,000 to fill out your paperwork for you, but who has that kind of money? So we just muddled through it, and by 2001, we had our federal permit. We had our, I mean, it's like dominoes. Once you get the federal, you can get the state. Once you get the state, you can get the local. Once you get the local, you can get your county. So I mean, it all falls in quickly at the end. So we got all permitted, and then in 2001 we were able to open. And the interesting thing about opening was all of a sudden we had cash flow. It was like, I don't know, the angels were singing or something, but all of a sudden Mom wasn't complaining about Dad taking her whole paycheck to buy wire and nails, and things were able to really start accelerating. So 2001. We opened for the first year from October to Christmas. It was 3 months. We got a couple of nice articles on Dad. We're in the Leader and I think in the Post and some other spots, and that gave us a good boost. So in the first 3 months, he had 4 wines, 2 red, 2 white, all dry, not a single sweet wine. And I think they sold something like $10,000, $12,000 of wine, which, when all the operating money we had was the leftovers from Mom's, $40,000 or $42,000 a year salary, that was big bucks, right? So the money all was reinvested, and that kind of set the pattern for everything we've done since then. You take the profits from one year and you reinvest it. You don't take it out as salary. You make do on what you have, and you just reinvest. And that's really what we did. In 2002 we were open for 9 months, and we almost doubled our sales. I think we were up to like 21,000 in 2001. In 2002. In 2003 we started getting requests for food, and this is a whole nother discussion with our family. We were thinking, okay, what can we do? Mom's a great cook, but we can't be a restaurant. I mean, who's going to drive way the heck out there for a restaurant? We don't have seating, we don't have staff, we don't have whatever. So we decided it had to be a meal that was by reservation, so we knew exactly how many people we were preparing food for, and it needed to be unique. And in Italy, whenever my parents or whenever I had gone back to Italy, for family celebrations, whether it's an anniversary, a wedding, whatever, they do the monster multi-course meal, all right? I still remember the only one I caught was when I was 13. My cousin Oscar got married, and it was like a 21-course meal, all right? Now, no one explained this to me, or maybe they did and I was too much of a teenager to listen, but I remember risotto, which is an Italian rice dish. It was like the third course, right? I loved risotto, and I was freaking hungry. It was like already 7 o'clock at night. So I just kept telling the guy, give me more, you know, and you know, he gave me more. So I filled up on risotto, and then I had to sit there for another 3 hours, full. You know, I wasn't, you know, I had some dessert after that, but there was like 15 more courses that went by, and I didn't have any of them because I had filled up on too much risotto. But anyway, so we talked about that, that whole experience in Italy, and we thought people here would probably really love to have a multi-course meal. And it would fit the criteria of moms, you know, not being set up to do short order. You could do it by reservation. Everyone arrives together. You can do a wine tasting. You know, you can serve them this multi-course meal and really get to mingle with your guests and give them a good personal touch and a great meal. So that's what we started doing. In 2003, we kicked off the 7-course dinners, and they were you know, a very big hit. You know, and that kind of got us started, and it really helped with the revenue in the winter as well. So we started the 7-course dinners in 2003, and then since I'm running late here, I'll just kind of fast forward. 2005, you know, I mean, we started from 2003 on. We started growing at a pretty phenomenal rate. 2005, I went there full time. 2006, Ron came on full time. 2007, Donna came in full time. You know, and now here we are, 2009, and you know, I don't know, we probably have 20 or 25 part-time people in addition to the group of us, and you know, we have more contracts than ever for weddings and other events. So I mean, the business is really continuing to grow at a pretty phenomenal pace. Now, just to reiterate a little bit about how we were able to grow, the biggest point is, you know, I think I've already emphasized this, is we did everything we possibly could ourselves. I mean, whether it's building parking lots, putting up buildings, the pavers, the walkways, the Four Seasons room. I mean, the Four Seasons room, let me give you a quick story about that. The Four Seasons room started out as a concrete pad because we had some people that wanted to have a small wedding out there, and we figured, well, if it rains a lot, the grass will be a mess. So we'll put up this little 20 by 30 concrete pad, put a 20 by 30 tent on it, and with our little wooden deck we had built, that'll be perfect. So we do that. It goes great, and they loved it. And then we left the tent up a lot, and people were sitting underneath there. So then we thought, gosh, wouldn't it be great to have a pavilion? You know? So that winter we went and we spent like $10,000, and we put this pavilion up. It was 32 by 32, open-sided pavilion, you know, with just corners in to where it would be stable. Well, that was so popular that the next year we're like, gosh, you know, people really love that. Wouldn't it be great if we could just kind of put up some kind of walls, you know? And I had been out to the boathouse with Adriana, and we saw that they took their covered porch area, and they had these like not plexiglass, the vinyl, the clear vinyl walls, you know, like stiffer than a tent, but you know, break the wind. So I saw that and was telling Dad about it, and then we came upon the idea that we could build panels out of plexiglass and 2x4 frames. Just, you know, groove the 2x4, slide the plexiglass in, screw it all shut, and then basically screw that into the post and beam frame of the pavilion, and we could make it weatherproof. So we did that. And then people started saying, gosh, we'd love to have our small weddings in there. So then we decided to finish the inside of it, you know? And then next year, or in 2006, we decided that, you know what, the electrical system here, because up until 2006, we only had a single 200 amp farm service for the whole frickin' place. We're like, you know, we're getting tired of this stuff blowing all the time. I think we need to do something. So we went ahead and we actually went and because it was electrical stuff, we actually went and got contractors to put in this electrical stuff, which that was hard for Dad. I got to tell you, he's like, I'm paying these yahoos $100 an hour for something I can do? That's, honest God, he had trouble with it. But anyway, so we increased the electrical service from 200 amps to 800 amps. We built an upper pond, we added bathrooms and expanded the pavilion. We did a bunch of projects in 2008. And we spent more money on projects in 2008 than we had in all the previous years combined because we used contractors. But hey, it's all good. But as I said, we did everything we possibly could for as long as we could. We worked on a cash basis, all right? We have known too many cases of people that want to open a vineyard and a winery that draw up the greatest business plan in the world, go to the bank, borrow $500,000 or $1 million, plant their vines, and buy all this equipment, build a facility, and then if any one thing goes wrong, if their vineyard gets killed off by deer or hail, or if someone gets sick or whatever, if anything goes wrong, you're done, all right? So Dad had always told me the best way is the slow way, take your time, trade time for money, don't be in a hurry. It's going to take a long time, but we'll get there. And now we're there, all right? So I don't know if it's the best way to go, but it certainly worked for us. And playing right into that is this whole feeling of Dad's that loans are just bad. So he doesn't like being in debt to anybody. So, I know I'm over time here, so I'll wrap up. But I'll just say our goal today, what we'd really like, is just to have a great facility for business people and community, people in St. Louis and Jefferson counties to come out. We want to have the best grounds, the best looking vineyard, the best food, the best wine, and we just want people to come out and kind of enjoy this family atmosphere that my parents have really been able to place on everything. I mean, everyone that comes out hopefully leaves feeling like they were part of something, and they can have that personal, conversation with Mom or Dad, or they're really well taken care of by the staff. Because, I mean, that's really what we want people to come away with, is that we're not just some corporation, because believe me, we're not. We're a bunch of really dedicated people just trying to do the best we can and to make sure everyone has as nice a time as they can while they're at our place. So that's what we're striving for, and hopefully we'll continue to do that as time goes on. And now I know it's past 1. I apologize for running late, but I'm Italian. I talk. So, yeah.